is in heaven. And so I believe in Rob Spencer. I believe in what he's trying to do in rural communities, and it's my honor to introduce him to you tonight.
Thank you, John. I do remember that day when you encouraged me to go on my own, however the words that you used. Just now, please, I'm not to tell this group what you actually said. So, I just want to thank all of you so much for being here tonight. We are really excited about our future. And what I wanted to do, let me just tell you, I'm going to chat for a little bit. I'm going to show you a little video, and then we're going to open up. We've got a great band. We're going to have a party. It's going to be fun. So if you just hang with me for a little bit, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. Some of you know, others of you don't. My dad was a Methodist pastor. My uncle was a Methodist pastor. My grandfather was a Methodist pastor, and my great-grandfather was a Methodist pastor. Yeah. All right. You did not want to have us all over for lunch. I can tell you that.
What about Colin?
Yeah, Colin, we're going to skip a generation. I grew up in Brazil. My parents were Methodist missionaries. And so we grew up in Rio and in Recife. And those memories that I have of those early years helped to shape me. Many of my friends, when I would go to their home to play, their floors were dirt floors. So working and being around persons that have a tough life has been a part of my life from the very, very beginning. When we came back, I was in junior high, and we ended up in a little town of Wiley, Texas. Now, I've been around for a while, but if you back up time, about 50 years, Wiley had a population of 2,500 people. It's a tiny little rural town, and I loved it. Met my wife, Celeste. We got married, had a couple of businesses early on. Actually in our early 20s, and then one day I had lunch with my dad, and he said, "Rob, have you ever considered going into the ministry?" And I knew right then that was a call. I had been running from it for a long time. So I ran home, and told Celeste, I said, "Honey, I'm going to be a preacher, and we're going to move to Kentucky, and I'm going to go to seminary." And she said, "Well, now you may go to Kentucky." That's how I ended up at Perkins and at Brown. So for 30 years, I've been pastoring churches most of the time in rural county seat type settings. I was in. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I'm going to tell you our story, our Cultiv8 community story. But what I realized is, oh, by the way, Gary and Shirley Savage, they are coming from Oklahoma from the speaking engagement. Gary and Shirley, we're so glad you're here. Gary is on our board. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So when I began thinking about what I wanted to say about our story, it hit me that our story, we wouldn't be here if it were not for the North Texas Conference, if it were not for City Square, if it were not for the Texas Methodist Foundation, if it were not for the East District, for First United Methodist Church Paris, for Oak Park, for Lauren Graves Shaw and the Graves Farm, all of those groups and so many of you helped to get us to this point. So I was asked to preach in Burke Burnett the other day. Jack and Shannon Miller were here. I picked a scripture that I wanted to use, and the scripture was one of those first ones in Genesis, where God creates in 6 days, rests on the seventh, and really what I wanted to preach about was the 8th day, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. So, our story started like this. The North Texas Conference challenged our churches to start mentoring programs with elementary kids. And so we got a bunch of folks in our church start spending 1 hour a week with an at-risk child. And so we had folks in schools, and the next thing I know, adults are falling in love with kids. And 2 of my mentors came to me and said, Rob, we have all kinds of problems in this town. What are we going to do? So I put together a meeting of some of the mentors and some school administrators, a couple of the leaders. And so we met and started listing some of the challenges that we had on this board. And then we met again in 2 weeks and listed some more. And again, and all of a sudden I had this board full of stuff. And I did not know what to do. But I had met Larry James. And I knew that Larry James had done some work like this, so I called Larry and he said, well, just come on down. So I went down, and next thing you know, Larry and I are hanging out with John and others over at City Square, and he agreed to mentor and kind of hang out with us for quite some time. We were also encouraged to start some poverty simulations, and so we did that. When we moved out to Graves Farm, we lived there for the very first year we were in Paris. We started doing some native habitat restoration, and we continued that work on the farm. And so I had a teacher in the 4th grade who gave me an assignment on monarch butterflies. And so we started a native habitat restoration, trying to help monarchs, and the school districts found out about it and said, hey, can we bring kids out? So we said, well, sure. And so groups from the public schools started coming out to the farm. It was interesting because some of the folks that helped us at the farm when these kids would come out were also mentors. So like when I went back to the school after having a group of kids out to the farm, and I would walk into the school, there would be other children that would be looking at me going, Mr. Spencer! Mr. Spencer, remember me? I was at the farm. And they did that with other mentors as well. So there was this strange connection. So all of that was going pretty well, and we talked with Larry one day, and as John said, they agreed to let us become a subsidiary of City Square. And today, City Square Paris has a facility of 20,000 square foot, a 13-acre campus on the west side of Paris, which is the most underserved part of town. Now, this is not a sermon, but it is appropriate for amens. So that's how we got to that point. I was on a phone call 18 months ago, and a friend said to me, Rob, have you ever considered what you could do in this field if you didn't have the church? And I said, well, yes. It's what I'm going to do when I retire in 10 years. And she said, oh, no. I want you to think about it now.
That's right.
What could you do right now? And I promise you, it was just like my dad 30 years ago. Now, this time when I went home and told Celeste, she received the news much better. And so we started this journey. Our work will be across North Texas, partnering with